just for everyone's background information, and I'm going to just come up here so I can point to the map. New York Waterway, you probably have heard of, you've hopefully heard of. We have 33 boats that carry 30,000 people a day on, well, you can't quite see it here, but on the Hudson side of Manhattan. Our 33 boats depart from a dozen different locations in New Jersey. The ferry system in Manhattan really is a terminal on 38th Street on the west side, a major terminal down on in Battery Park City on the west side of downtown, and Pier 11 on the foot of Wall Street downtown. And we operate from those dozen locations in New Jersey to these 3 locations in Manhattan. And we've been talking to the city for a number of years, culminating earlier this year actually, in our being awarded the contract for the East River Ferry Service, which will start sometime in June. We'll have an exact a date next week. I think we'll be announcing the exact date, but it'll be in the first half of the month of June. So there have been a number of efforts over the years at trying to inaugurate and sustain East River Ferry Service. They haven't really been successful. We at New York Waterway, as a matter of fact, had an effort at it from the Hunters Point area many years ago. New York Water Taxi, you may know, has had a version of it connecting Fulton Ferry, Schaefer Landing, and Hunters Point. Didn't quite have the frequency to really take hold. The city, as part of its effort along the waterfront in recent years, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with that, the rezoning and the development efforts that have been taking place, decided a number of years ago to explore the possibility of inaugurating full-blown ferry service on the East River. And you may be familiar with the EDC's 5-borough ferry study that was just promulgated last month, I believe. And this is they identified in that study 3 or 4 corridors to explore ferry service, to take advantage of that we are all surrounded by rivers and waterways that connect us. And this was the first corridor that the city's been focused on for a number of years to experiment with ferry service. So beginning in June, we are going to run a service that connects the dark blue line is the main route. And we're going to run that route 7 days a week, 363 days a year. We're not operating it on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, I believe. So during the peak rush hour, which is actually it's all in this one chart here, but in 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. and 4:30 to 7 on weekdays throughout the year, we'll operate with 20-minute frequency in each direction. So you can be at the foot of North 6th Street at the stop in North Williamsburg and catch a boat heading down every 20 minutes, or heading to Midtown every 20 minutes. We do that by the fact that this route takes 1 boat an hour to do, and we put 3 boats on that can accomplish that frequency. So during the weekends, we'll be operating every half hour during what we call the 7 months of the summer, from April 1 to October 31. And during the winter, on the weekends, it'll be hourly service. During the off-peak in the middle of the week, it'll be, again, splitting between the winter and the summer. On weekdays in the summer season, between 9 and 4:30, and then after, I think, 7 or 7:30, it'll be half-hour frequency, and again, during the winter off-peak, it'll be hour frequency. In addition to that, you see these other lines down here. I'll explain that briefly. So on those summer weekends when Governor's Island is open, the 30-minute frequency that I described will become 35-minute frequency, because it'll incorporate a stop at Governor's Island, so that from any one of these locations you'll have a 1-seat ride to any of these other destinations in Brooklyn that you may want to visit, but it will also take you directly to Governor's Island. I don't know if anyone in the room who's taken advantage of everything that's gone on in Governor's Island in recent years, but you had to find your way down to the foot of Atlantic Avenue to get the ferry there. Now that was and will continue to be, at least for this season, a free service provided by Governor's Island, and this is a paid service, but it's a one-seat ride that'll take you directly to Governor's Island on the weekend. This little box here is an additional route. It was inaugurated last summer. We're going to continue it, and it's just this recreational loop on Fridays in the off-peak. So really from 9 to 4:30, we'll run a boat that'll connect these various stops. So this is the southern end of Brooklyn Bridge Park. I don't know if any of you have been to Brooklyn Bridge Park since it's really reopened. But this stop is at the north end of it, and this stop is at the south end. So this recreational loop will connect all of these stops on Friday afternoons. Again, on the weekends when Governor's Island is open. So that's the service in a nutshell. I'll talk about a couple of other aspects, but you can see that it's a connecting service, so that the boat will stop at each one of these locations on its way to Midtown or downtown, or the locations in Brooklyn. So it's probably about a 5-minute interval for each of these stops. So you can figure that if you're going from India Street down to Wall Street, it's a 25-minute trip. If you want to travel from location to Dumbo, which is an attractive site to visit, as I mentioned, Brooklyn Bridge Park, it's 15 minutes, 10 minutes from here. So I'm sure everyone is also curious about the pricing of this service, and that's something we're also going to have an announcement on the final details next week. But I'll tell you, when we initially announced the service, a month or two ago, you'll see this downtown zone, this midtown zone, and the notion was that it was a $3 fare if you were staying within a zone, and a $5.50 fare if you were crossing zones. That's a complicated system to implement, so we're exploring ways to simplify things. So we'll have some fun, but that's the price range. So it'll either be that or some single fare system in between that. But that's the range, and that's as ferry traffic goes. I know it's more expensive than a subway fare, a single subway fare, but as ferry traffic goes, it's considerably less expensive than any of the Trans-Hudson routes. And that's because this is a subsidized service. David introduced himself before from the EDC. EDC is subsidizing this service. We signed an agreement to provide it for the next 3 years. We're hoping it takes on a life of its own after that. But it is a subsidized service that the city is sponsoring that enables us to offer that pricing, which we think is certainly comparatively attractive. Any questions? I think I covered the highlights of the service.
Yeah. Can you go over ferry shelters, and if there will be ferry shelters, where to pick up the tickets, and...
Okay, we're going to have, very good question. So we're going to have automated ticket kiosks at each one of the locations on the Brooklyn-Queens side of this service. There is, I'll take the locations in this neighborhood specifically, so that at the foot of India Street at Greenpoint, there's a new pier, I'm all familiar with, that's being installed by constructed by the developer at that site. There's a barge system at the end that's not yet in place, but will be between now and when we launch in June. And on that pier, there'll be a ticket kiosk, a place to buy tickets from a vending machine. That's sort of it at the moment. The intention is that there will be a shelter built on that pier. It won't be ready this June. I'm not sure of the timeline of that. The goal is to get to have a sheltered waiting area in each one of these locations. I mean, most of these are either in parklands or city parklands, or lands that are intended to be part of city parks. So there isn't going to be a big terminal at that destination, but hopefully eventually there'll be like a bus shelter or something a little nicer or better than a bus shelter. we're working with the city to try and arrange for the funding for that, because it's not yet in place. So the intention is for that sort of bus shelter to be built in the area on the foot of North 6th Street, and the same thing at Schaefer Landing. Fulton Ferry is a bit more of a challenge because it's this historic district, but there are places to wait. I don't know if you're familiar with that area. There's the Brooklyn Ice Cream Factory, and it's a good place. I find myself waiting there all the time. So there's no intention of a shelter being built at that location. We're also going to have, I hope by launch, I expect by launch, that there'll be we've got an app for that, right? So we're going to have, you're going to have the ability to establish an account with us through your smartphone, if you have one, and when you get to the terminal, you won't have to interact with the ticket vending machine or any of our ticket agents. You'll be simply able to activate your ticket for that particular ride, and then the ticket will display on here, and that'll be your boarding pass, if you will, just displaying the screen of your phone. I want to mention one other thing in terms of the pricing plan that I was talking about. We'll also have a discounted monthly for those who want to use it as commuters, but also we think this will be very attractive for people who want to use this for recreational purposes, and there's a lot to visit in this, whether it's East River State Park or Brooklyn Bridge Park or Governor Sound. There's a lot of recreational sites along the way, so we think there will be a lot of people who want to just hop on and hop off and visit multiple sites in a given day. So we're going to have an all-day pass as well. It'll be something like the equivalent of 3 rides, something in that neighborhood, 3 single-trip rides. At Pier 11 there is a waiting area, a terminal, and there's a manned ticket booth there, and the city is building a small terminal at 34th Street as well. It'll be open in a year and a half, and we have sort of an interim ticket place, but no place to wait. But eventually there will be a small terminal there, a waiting area in that location.
What about security?